What's going on, FPL managers? Welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. I'm joined by three others today. It's the first time we've done a four-person stream on Scout for a very long time. So glad to have you with us ahead of the deadline. We're going to be talking about the key talking points ahead of the deadline with any last-minute transfer questions that might be useful for you guys. I'm joined by Mark. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, really looking forward to another game week where no doubt my hope will be exploded, but never mind. We'll see what happens.
I mean, yeah, your team's different to everyone else's, so I mean that's something interesting to talk about. We'll come to your team later on. Zoph, how are you, buddy?
Doing great, Ed. Thanks for having me on. Good to be here again.
Absolutely. A masterclass of managers here. I feel very daunted. And we've got Seb. How are you, bud?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. A little bit sleepy, but I've got coffee, I've got GW3, so I'm sure I'll perk up by the end of this.
Fantastic. We'll get on to some key talking points in a minute, but before we start the stream, I've got to talk about Fanslide, which is partnering with Fantasy Football Scout for this season. It is a innovative new game. It's basically in-play fantasy football, where you have 3 slots to pop in a player during one single match. One is single points, one is double points, one's triple points, and you can use a player only for 20 minutes during the match. So it's all that sort of timeline of, the first half, second half. Do you put defenders in first in the first half for clean sheets? 20-minute clean sheets, so that's kind of cool. And then you get points for things like tackles, obviously goals and assists, interceptions, all that good stuff. There's £500 to be won on Monday night, free to play. You have to be in the GB. Great Britain, and it's 18 plus, so please do gamble responsibly. Do check out Fanslide. It seems like a pretty cool idea. So yeah, have you guys ever played this game before?
No, I haven't, but I like the idea, and it kind of links into your thread earlier in the week, or a couple of weeks back, about XG increasing in the final third of the game, right? So you kind of think, well, let's stick attacking players in the final block of time. I imagine that's what you would do, right, Ted?
Yeah, it seems like, for anyone that missed that, it's basically saying that the second half of games has a lot more XG in general. So I think probably the meta for that would be playing defenders in the first half and then attackers in the second. But yeah, check it out.
Obviously, attackers more at risk of being subbed towards that end. So or subbed on, I guess. Maybe you have some subbed on. You get more goals, similar to what you were saying, more goals at the end of each half, don't you? So obviously first half and then second half, like you were saying. So defenders first half, like you say, and then maybe get someone on before half time, and then second half attackers, something like that.
It's all worth planning it all out, but at the end of the day, anything can happen in one single match. Liverpool Man United is the one that you can win some money on, so do check that out. Who knows what's going to happen in that match? All right, enough about Fanslide. Let's get on to the first talking point. A lot of people in the chat joining us. Welcome, everyone. We're going to be talking about 5 million defenders, first of all. Key talking point. People swapping out Robertson this week to maybe upgrade to Luis Diaz in midfield. We've got Perisic, we've got Cucurella, we've got Walker, and we've got Zinchenko up here. And I just want to have a discussion, guys, about what order of priority would you put these guys in? I mean, there's talk about Perisic starting today, potentially. If he does, that would be really, really dangerous. So come to Zoff first. Who's your favourite out of these 4 guys?
I think Perisic would be in another bracket in terms of potential and output, but also in terms of rotation risk, probably the most at risk of missing games when the Champions League, etc. comes around. So I think probably Perisic top, then Cucurella second, and around Walker third would be probably my top 3 5.0 defenders.
Yeah, that new signing for City, does that worry you at all, Mark? I mean, does Walker have risk of rotation going forward, or do you reckon he's okay?
Yeah, he'll get some rotation. I mean, if they don't sign another fullback, I don't think the rotation's coming anytime soon, because the way that City are deploying their fullbacks this season isn't kind of by the book, is it? They're inverting them, they're pushing them into midfield. Walker and Cancelo have been at the club a long time, know that system and know that tactic. Gomez is coming in and will have to learn that system. So I don't think he's going to throw Gomez into that and make him, enact that system in a Premier League game. He may well do it in a Champions League group game when the group is done, but I just can't see him being a factor yet. Obviously, he's in the squad. He can come on for the last 15, 20 minutes. He can rest one of Walker, Cancelo for that period, but I don't see Gomez starting yet. I think we've seen Pep integrate new signings quite slowly. when they're not key signings like Haaland. And I think that'll be the case with Gomez. And I don't even know. I mean, is Gomez of a level yet to compete with Walker, Cancelo? There's question marks on that as well.
I think we take things out of context from the pressers in particular. There's a quote from Pep saying he's going to be in the squad this game. It doesn't mean he's going to be on the pitch. So I think Walker's okay for the time being. Yeah. We've got Cucurella there, Seb, and he's quite a hot pick at the moment. Obviously, the downside is that Chilwell at some point becomes, a rotation threat. But can Cucurella play at left centre back? There's quotes from the manager saying he can.
Yeah, I think he can. We saw him do it for Brighton. And as you say, Tuchel has said he can do it. It's whether they sign Fofana, whether that knocks on. I think Thiago Silva, Azpilicueta are probably the ones that are more likely to drop out and rotate. So you're going to see Koulibaly get a lot of time, potentially Fofana if he signs. Cucurella can then cover left wing back and left centre back. Tuchel also mentioned a back four and how Chilwell would be the better pick. The better pick at left wing back and Cucurella would be the better pick at left back, I believe he said. Although they're probably a long way off actually playing a back four in terms of the squad shape at the moment. And realistically, I think all of us are planning a wild card, 8, 9, something like that. So all these questions don't matter if they happen in, enough weeks' time. We've got 4 weeks, give or take, for these picks to work. So we'll talk about teams later. I haven't done Cucurella myself, but I was tempted. And I can understand it depending on, how and why you've done it in your own circumstances.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously Walker and Zinchenko come from teams where we probably have double or treble ups already. So it might be quite difficult to get these guys in just because of the state of play in your team. Whereas Perisic and Cucurella, we haven't really gone hard on Spurs and Chelsea just yet, so they're easier to get in. So Seb, what would be your order of preference for these four guys if you didn't have any constraints?
So with the bias towards the short term, probably Walker, maybe Cucurella over Perisic and then Zinchenko. But that's heavily biased towards just the minutes I expect them to get. Obviously, I think as Zoff said, if Perisic goes and starts the next 3, he's probably the best bet, but I don't know if he does that.
Yeah, okay. Mark, what about you? Order of this? I mean, Perisic, if he starts, he's got to be up there, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like, I think if we were sitting here at the start of the season, I think the reason why Walker was a great pick is because he was secure and he gave you time to see what was going to happen elsewhere, which is why I went Walker. Perisic obviously was a far riskier pick and it's proven to be the case. But if he starts today and he does well, that's indication you've got to think that he's first choice. I guess the only thing then is he going to get 60 every game? Because Sessegnon's going to be a threat to that. But you'd have to put Perisic top right now. If I was making a priority list right now, I'd be going with what Zoff said there. I'd go Perisic, Cucurella, probably Walker, and then Zinchenko, probably. Because I just think with Arsenal, you've got Ramsdale and you've got 2 attacking options at least, haven't you? So and also Zinchenko, Tierney's fit now, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. Where Zinchenko slots in elsewhere in the 11. Presumably, he will get in the 11 somewhere. But I think the talk is that Tierney's not far off coming in at left back.
I think we're all pretty much aligned there. I think if Perisic starts, he's got to be number 1. And then Cucurella's a really good option while he's starting for Chelsea. I think that he's good for the next couple of 2 to 3 game weeks at least. And then Walker's uninspiring going forwards, but you're locking in for six points every week when City get their clean sheets. And who knows about Zinchenko, but seems to be attacking wise. He could play midfield as well. If anyone is wondering about options for 5 million defenders, that's probably our conclusion. We're going to move on to captaincy, and captaincy is really interesting this week because looking at our teams, I think between us, we've picked 3 different captains this week. So I wonder how widespread captaincy is going to be across the entire board. And so we've got Salah against Man United, Jesus, Bournemouth away, and then Son and Kane against Wolves at home, KDB and Haaland against Newcastle away. And Mark, you have gone for Son against Wolves.
Yeah, I think I had to, right? I made the policy to go Son over Salah at the start and see how that went. And so Son has got to be my captain. I've got to back him. I think that it's a good fixture, and if there wasn't the likes of Salah and Haaland and De Bruyne and Jesus, they're obviously high-owned players, so they're dominating the argument in the community. But I don't think they're dominating the argument because they're necessarily much better picks. I think they're just dominating because of the ownership. If Son had 50% ownership, he would be very much in the conversation, but he hasn't. He's got 20, and therefore, he's not being mentioned in the same kind of bracket. But he's been sensational in home matches for Spurs. I think last season he was the best point scorer in home matches of any asset. And yes, he blanked against Southampton, but he could have definitely come out with a goal. He got a return, but not as much as I would have wanted. I think any home game where it's a good fixture, you've got to back Son and Kane, and so I don't think it's a massive leap of faith to go with Son.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, because they're lesser owned, I mean, Kane and Son have both had price drops, so people moving away from the Spurs guys. But arguably, it's kind of the best fixture because it is at home. And I would say that Bournemouth away might seem on paper like a good fixture, but I'm super sceptical always at Vitality in previous seasons where Bournemouth have played in the Premier League. The size of that stadium, the claustrophobia that it generates, big teams want to stretch play and try and create space. I think it is a bit of a banana skin. So Zoff, you're captaining Jesus this week. Have you factored...
Have I sent you Jesus? I've actually moved to Salah. I might have sent you an older screenshot.
There we go.
You bailed last minute.
My narrative is Ted.
Yeah, my narrative is destroyed.
It's literally clicked. I heard the clicks off. Don't pretend you didn't do it,
Okay. Well, pretend that you are. What do you think about that Bournemouth away fixture? Is it easier than, or is it harder than maybe people think?
I don't know how much you can read into Parker's comments early season where he talked about all his team being injured and stuff like that. They were the most frugal team in the championship last season. So I don't know if he was playing possum a little bit over there. He's fundamentally a defensive manager from what I can see. So he won't be afraid to set up defensively. But I do think Arsenal, the way they've started, the way Jesus has started, it is the easiest fixture on paper.
Interesting. I personally think they're going to be quite hard to break down. I mean, I think Arsenal against Palace, they're a tight-knit defence, aren't they, Palace? Jesus obviously struggled a little bit. I wonder whether that lack of space will be similar for Jesus against Bournemouth. He played against Leicester last week. Leicester are a poor defence, and they will probably get worse if Fofana probably signs for Chelsea. What do you think, Mark? Is Jesus the second option after Salah, or is that fit? No,
it's Salah for me. I mean, if I had Salah, I probably would be going Salah, which is why I've gone Son. I mean, Jesus obviously looked fantastic against Leicester, but they are one of the weaker defences at the moment. We saw that last season. They've lost Schmeichel, so I think they afforded Arsenal quite a lot of space, and there was a lot of gaps, and Arsenal exploited it. They won't see that space at Bournemouth, but it's a question of quality. Have Bournemouth got the quality? Are they going to make errors that will let Arsenal win? Probably. I think Arsenal will still win by a couple of goals, but it won't be easy. They won't be raining in shots like they were against Leicester. Jesus might have scraps, but he might still score, right? Because he's good enough.
Bernardo's put it in the chat. I was just about to say this. Bournemouth's defensive stats are pretty good, even having played Man City. Not too many big chances conceded compared to the likes of Leicester and West Ham, who have played difficult defences. So that's something to bear in mind if you are captaining Jesus this week. I don't think Bournemouth's defence is as bad as you think. Seb, I'll come to you next. What do you think about KDB and Haaland option against Newcastle away? Are they going to play out Newcastle, or are they going to sit back?
So I've got Haaland and I've opted against him going with Salah. So I wouldn't, anyone who doesn't have Salah and has, say, a KDB or a Haaland, entirely understand it. Newcastle away isn't the easiest fixture there, but it's still City. It's not like they're playing Liverpool or something. So entirely understand it. I don't think it's going to be anyone's preference if they have, for example, a Spurs player, definitely Salah, maybe even Jesus. I've got Jesus, Salah and Haaland, and I think my vice is on Jesus at the moment. So clearly City are my third preference. But I think that's just because Newcastle are out of these fixtures here, they are probably the closest to a good defence that someone could face. And also then there's the minutes slight risk with Haaland, as we've seen in the previous weeks. He'll get subbed off if they're a few goals up.
Sometimes I think it's a bit counterintuitive with Haaland. I think you need to play him in the more difficult games. And I guess Newcastle falls into that category a little bit. Really depends if they try and play, because I think obviously more space benefits Haaland. But I did waver this morning. I did fancy moving the captaincy to Haaland, but then reeled myself back in. Salah seems to be the best option. Man United in defensive disarray as usual. So I think with the loss of Darwin Núñez as well, it seems like the narrative is saying that Salah's going to get that those big chances back again. I think, are we all roughly in agreement that Salah's probably the best captain this week?
Yeah, I think he probably is. It would be just like, if it was last season, then United will have an incredible recovery and win 1-0 and Martinez will mark Salah out the game. But that was last season. I can't see it happening this time.
Okay, good discussion. Let's move on to teams. We've got 12 minutes before the deadline. It's unlikely we're going to get any early team news. We will stick around until the team news at 11:30. I think, Zoff, you said that you might have to make a move, but that's perfectly cool. Let's move on to teams. So we've got Mark. Your team is up here. For the purposes of the podcast listeners, we've got Ramsdale in goal, Cancelo, Alexander-Arnold, James Walker, Son, Luis Diaz, Saka, Martinelli, Haaland and Tony. So no Jesus, no Salah, and Son captain.
Yeah, I mean, although it is different. It's only different by about 2 or 3 players, and people don't see Salah and Jesus and then go, "Oh my God!" But actually, the players I've got in there are decent players. They're just not the players everybody owns. So it's like what I said earlier. These players aren't in the conversation just because of effective ownership. It's not that they're risky picks. Tony's got very good fixtures. He's made a good start to the season. Brentford, I did have doubts about Brentford. I didn't know whether they would be creating enough chances, but they look like they've gone up a level. They look like they've got a little bit more confidence having had that one season, and that difficult second season might not materialise. And obviously they've got Damsgaard to come in as well. So I like Tony. Obviously, like Mitrovic, he's the talisman. He's on penalties. I think Tony's got slightly better fixtures than Mitrovic, which is why I went with him. And Son, well, he's an elite player. He was like Golden Boot winner. So again, he's not in the conversation because he's not a good player. It's just I've gone him over Salah, and we'll see how it goes. So far, I'm trailing by 14 points, but it'll only take a return from Son today and a blank from Salah, and it's narrowed up again. So we'll see what happens. So yeah, it's a different looking team, but it's not like incredibly maverick. My defence is the same as many others. I've got Diaz like everybody else. I've got Martinelli like everybody else, and I've got Haaland like everybody else. So even my team, which people tout as being different, it's not that different, which kind of sums up where we are, I think.
I think you just need the fixtures to go the expected way. You just need the alternative player to do well compared to the popular pick, and that will be perfectly feasible in 1 week. And when that happens, you'll be in a massive green arrow. Yeah,
so I need Saka to be the goal scorer at Bournemouth, and I need Son to get something against Wolves. It's not massive arse, is it? But it hasn't happened yet.
Oh, it will do. It will do. Okay, thanks, Mark. On to Zoff's. We've got a 5-3-2. Oh, God, this looks very similar to quite a lot of teams out there. And I think Seb and myself probably have very similar teams. But yeah, podcast listeners, we've got Ramsdale in goal again, Alexander-Arnold, Cancelo, Cucurella, James, Perisic. Oh, I'm jealous of that Perisic pick, it has to be said. Luis Diaz in midfield, Martinelli, Salah, Haaland and Jesus. Well, I have got Jesus captain here, but you just said that you changed it to Salah.
Yes.
So tell me about what moves did you make this week?
I think I did Robertson, Neto and Bailey out for Cucurella, Diaz and Reed.
A -4 early on this season. That's not like Hughes off.
I think it was worth it because it was more of a structural thing. Like we were discussing earlier, there's nothing much wrong with the Robertson pick, but there's value there in defense in that 5.0 bracket, and that 8.0 midfield spot looks too attractive to turn down. So just mostly a switch around.
Yeah, it looks a really good squad. I think that -4, that move from Robbo to Luis Diaz in midfield has been a quite popular move this week. I certainly refrained from it, but I'm kind of jealous for the people that took the hit. I think your team looks excellent. The big at the back, crikey, it's monstrous. You just got to hope that Perisic starts this week, right?
Yep. I've had him on my bench the last 2 game weeks. I haven't used a transfer on him, so hopefully, fingers crossed, he delivers today.
Okay, good luck. And Seb, probably a very similar team. It's actually not too bad. Not too similar. We've got Ward and
relative to the game we've been presented this year, of course. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean
whole 2 players different.
I didn't mean to say too bad. I meant to say too different. Sorry, yes. So Ward and Sanchez. Are you wavering at all? Is that going to?
I mean, it feels like a bit of a coin toss. I think I've actually swapped them around this morning, simply just on the Fofana news for Leicester. But we know Leicester's defence is worse than Brighton's, but West Ham's attack is better than Southampton's. So much of a muchness. Maybe the team news just tipped it over the edge to Sanchez for me. But I wouldn't be surprised if, whichever one I pick, I end up in a couple of days' time going, oh no, variance, woe is me.
Yeah. Okay. So the rest of your team, for the podcast listeners, Alexander-Arnold, Cancelo, Walker, that double City defence, James and Gabriel as your third Arsenal player, Salah captain, Luis Diaz, Martinelli, Haaland and Jesus. Very solid team. It's going to be interesting this week about the combinations of defenders. I think it started to differ a little bit rather than the double Liverpool, double City and sort of Reece James sort of thing. But do we think that maybe the template will shift out a bit more like a chess game? The start opening is going to become more different, or is it maybe just come back to the template next week, Mark?
I don't know. It is difficult. I mean, I'm looking at your teams here and thinking, if we gave you 2 transfers next week, you'd struggle to make one. Right? They're so strong. And there's no good reason at the moment to deviate from these players. The likes of Martinelli, Jesus, Cancelo, Salah, Haaland, Trent. You're not gonna move off them players. And also, I think the value is clear now. Normally, there's 1 or 2 value picks in midfield, and that's where we go to for value. But instead of that, we're gravitating to a back 5 and finding the value there, and then playing with 3 or even 2 midfielders. I've seen teams with 2 midfielders. So I do think it's going to be difficult to break this up, because normally, like I say, it's a 5.5 midfielder or a 5 million midfielder, and there's a few options like that. What we need is, we do need somebody like I don't want to mention it, but Gibbs White to hit the ground running at Forest, and suddenly people go, oh, is it Perisic, or do I go someone like a 5-5 in midfield? But that probably won't happen. I still, Perisic will do well, and there'll be 5 million defenders that you'll want. So I do think this is probably going to be one of the most robust templates we've seen in the history of FPL, sadly.
Yeah, we won't get onto the pricing because that's probably affected it. But do you think that, due to the strength of the template, that this now gives opportunity for people to focus on things like upside chasing rather than saving transfers and just making the necessary ones each week? So without the fires to fight, you just go for the best 1 or 2 game week fixtures, don't you?
Yeah, I'm thinking that I'll probably free up some money and then rotate Son and De Bruyne and try and get difference like that, because people are going to stick with Salah and Haaland, definitely. So I've got to try and play against that and hope that De Bruyne and Son do better. I just don't see people aren't going to steal Salah, and I think Haaland's going to need to struggle over the next 2 or 3 games before we start thinking, oh, is Kane a better option? I just don't. We're going to keep the faith, I think.
Yeah, it's a difficult problem. So Seb, did you make 3 transfers this week and took a -4?
No, I rolled one of mine. I had 2 going into this, and I made 1. I did Bailey to De Silva to bank some cash before the price change. And then I rolled my other one. I nearly did one of Walker or Gabriel, probably Gabriel to Cucurella, simply because he was also rising in price, and I have a plan. I have $1 million in the bank. I have a plan for that. But I didn't, because it seemed silly. Although now when the deadline passes, Cucurella will probably just rise tonight instead, and they play tomorrow. So it may be in the same situation anyway. But no, I think I had a fortunate start. I went with a team that seemed sensible to me, and it performed well. And I've had the luxury of being able to not make transfers and even bank some cash.
I mean, you were ahead of the curve with the Luis Diaz pick, so it's always nice when the template meets you. And
I wouldn't say that's how I play. That sounds probably arrogant, but in terms of, like, obviously Mark discussing there, the Haaland, the Kanes, the Sons, the Salahs, I think for me, I very much try and ignore what the wider field are doing and just pick the players that I think are best based on whatever, metric or opinion you want to pick those players. That's fine. But sticking to that. And then, yeah, sure, later in the season, maybe you can chase some risk, upside, whatever it is. But right now, I think there's nothing to be gained from going, oh, it's really tight, therefore I should be different. Because chances are you'll do yourself misfortune. You'll do worse rather than do better. So I'm very happy to be the same as everyone else for a while and allow an opportunity to come my way, which, for the record, I think might be when Game Week 5 is a midweek, and then we have Europe, and the top teams have no midweek off until the World Cup, if you include the international break. So at that point, I wouldn't be surprised if we start looking elsewhere from Haaland, maybe even a Mitrovic, someone who is going to play 90 every week. That might be the opportunity, I think.
Yeah, that shift to a 4-3-3 looked really good after Game Week 1, but it sort of wavered a little bit. I wonder whether that will come back around. Definitely the formation seems to be the pertinent question going forwards, because it enables certain players. Very difficult to get to Darwin Núñez after game week 1 for anyone that went big at the back. Who knows? We should enable that maybe going forwards. We've got a couple minutes before the deadline. Let's just look at my team. I'm the only one that's gone Pascal Groß out of all of you guys, and that just makes me think that I've done a terrible, terrible thing.
Scoutcast community team did Groß. You're in good company.
So I had 2 free transfers. I made them both no hit. I kept Robertson, suffered the price drop this morning. Hopefully he does something big against Man United, but who knows? It seems like everyone's moved to Luis Diaz. I'm getting a little bit of FOMO, but the team looks good. I mean, Ramsdale in goal, Robertson, Alexander-Arnold, James and Cucurella, the Chelsea double up, and then Cancelo, Salah captain, Martinelli, Pascal Groß. Come on. God, you've got to do something for me. And then Jesus and Haaland. It's one of those, isn't it? When you transfer in a player like Pascal Groß with no real immense FPL pedigree, no consistency across FPL seasons, you go, I'm definitely falling into a trap here. But he does look a little bit more advanced, and they've got good fixtures. I mean, I've tried not to overthink it. So what are you guys' views on Pascal Groß? Could he be a good asset going forwards?
I think in any other season, it's like I just said about, normally this is where you would be going for your value. You would be going to players like Groß. And the fact that you're sitting there going, oh, have I done the wrong thing, just shows you that the value this season is in defence. Like, you wouldn't be thinking twice, I don't think, going Groß before, because Brighton are top of the ticker in terms of fixtures. He's on penalties, and he is, obviously playing with a bit more attacking freedom this season from what we've seen. It might be a small sample. I guess you've gone a bit early. That's the only thing, in that, we're only basing it on 2 game weeks. But in any other season, that would be a reasonable pick, well, better than a reasonable pick. It would be a very popular pick. But because there's the likes of Perisic, Walker, Zinchenko at 5 million in defence, people are playing safer and going with that, which is a shame. But that's the way it's, I don't blame people. It's going to be more effective to do that probably, because that's where the value is. But I do commend you on the Groß pick, and hopefully it'll come in for you.
Well, I mean, I weighed it up. I think it was the dilemma was Robertson and Groß versus Walker and Luis Diaz -4. And I'm like, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other, especially if Walker potentially gets rotated. Obviously, if Groß turns out to be a terrible pick, then that's probably a bad move. But 0.9 in the bank could have feasibly go up to the likes of Mitrovic as a forward or something like that. Who knows? I haven't taken a hit. That's my only consolation. And it has to be said, I'm jealous of the people that have gone down to a 5 million defender and have Luis Diaz in midfield. It probably looks like a better formation overall. But that's me. Who knows? Who knows what will happen? Right, I think we're past the deadline now. Happy game week 3, chaps. Are you looking forward to it?
Any shocks with the team? Oh, no, we don't get the team news yet, do we? What am I saying?
Another 15 minutes.
Well, we don't get the team news anyway, no, but I'm sure the leaks will start popping up in 15 minutes time. I think you're all right with Perisic, Zoff, from what I've heard. I mean, there's a lot of talk that he starts, so yeah.
Oh my God, was there
You're dreading that, Ted?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He was ruled out for me because I just didn't want that dilemma of playing him or not. And I guess people that have held on from game week 1 and game week 2, you kind of priced into keeping. But
what will be interesting though is if he does start but goes off on 55 minutes or something like that. And then it's like, that's interesting, because it's like,
interesting wouldn't be the word I use.
No, but it could happen. That could easily happen, right? And we don't know when. I mean, Conte used to do that quite a lot, I think, with him. Seb, is that right? I think I saw he took him off before the hour mark quite a lot.
I think he averaged like low 60s or something with Conte last time. So like you say, he rotated them plenty. Although he did, when he when he did settle on his wing backs, he did have them as first choice. But they get through a lot of work, so he does give them time. I wouldn't be surprised if I don't own a Spurs defender all season. Like, I'll spend all season wanting one, but never quite feeling like it's the sensible move. And I mean, hey, if you have Perisic and he explodes, amazing, well done. You've betted me there. From my point of view, I'm just happy to maybe try and resist, because he'll get 14 this week and then not start next week, and then that'll just go on all season. And the thing on top of that as well is, with players like that, I want to know which fixtures they're going to play, because if they play every other game, that's fine. But what if every other game is City and Bournemouth? Well, I want the Bournemouth one. And if I don't know if I'm going to get that, that's doubling down on the losses I could make elsewhere.
Yeah, that's the point with Perisic, I guess. Like, you've got to look at who's going to play in Europe And also, is he going to be saved for the games that you least want him for, like the tough games? Like, you've got to think if he's first choice, he's going to be first choice in the harder games. And Sessegnon could get the Bournemouth at home, couldn't he? So there's a lot undecided. Even if he does well today, there's still a lot up in the air with Perisic, I think.
Yeah, the comments are strange, and especially when we go into the Champions League rotation. I kind of agree with Seb to a certain extent. I guess if you average what Perisic is likely to get over the next 4 or 5 weeks, then maybe that, he could get 12 pointers in some of them, but 1 pointers in the other. If you average that out with a consistent Man City 6-pointer every week, then it probably doesn't make any difference. So I think you can play the game in different ways. If you want that upside, yeah, I don't blame you. Perisic, if you knew he was starting, arguable captain option this week.
Wow. Yeah, whether he'll come into the captain conversation, I don't know. That might be a stretch, but yeah. It would be nice. That would shake it up, wouldn't it? But we'll see.
Goodness me. Oh. I think, is there any chance that the Liverpool-Man United game gets called off, or is it just the press doing a little bit of...
Nah. I mean, famous last words, it will now. But no, I don't think so. It's all just because, a similar thing happened in the past when it wasn't expected. They weren't prepared for it. Just like everyone in the media and us are saying, oh, it could happen. Well, the authorities will be aware of that and will be making sure it doesn't. Sure, don't vice captain someone from Liverpool as well, just in case. That's a sensible precaution, but I wouldn't worry about it.
It'll be tense if there's like a delayed kickoff and then people really will be biting their nails. But yeah, I think we'll be okay. Obviously, there's been no talk of that in the media, and we're progressing as normal. But like Seb says, you just don't vice any Liverpool player and hope for the best. But I think it'll be fine.
What's the psychology with your vices? Because if there is a genuine danger of it not happening, do you want your vice captains to do well? Obviously you do, but from an expected ownership perspective, it's really difficult. I think expected ownership, it kind of ruins my enjoyment because it just confuses me. Like, what do I want to happen during this?
Yeah.
I think my life would be happier if I didn't know about it.
Yeah, just don't look. It's like when you're, when halfway through a game week and you look after into Saturday night, like, oh, how am I doing? Oh, I've dropped 100k because I've only had 2 players play. Don't do that to yourself.
No.
Lock that team in. Come back Monday.
I don't look at the live stuff, and also like things like transfer decisions. I got Reece James, and I didn't even look at the ownership. And then afterwards, I got him. Blimey, he's 90 something owned amongst like the top 100 or top 10k. But it's good that I didn't let that affect my decision, because what if I'd have looked at that first and gone, oh, I won't get James, I'll get a different player. And you don't want to be doing that. You want to be getting the best player. That's your thinking. And then look at the ownership afterwards. Don't let it dictate things. So I think awareness of it is the worst thing. It's a useful tool to have and look at, but if you're not careful, it becomes the most important thing guiding your decisions when it shouldn't be.
I mean, for me, it's a tiebreaker, or maybe a little bit of risk management, especially later in the season. But yeah, I think it gets a lot of airtime when it doesn't deserve it. I don't know about you, Zoff. What do you think?
Could you just repeat the question, please? I just got lost in the chat for a second.
Oh, sure. So just talking about ownership. And so Mark was looking at Reece James and made the move without looking at his ownership, but then realized he was very highly owned. Does that influence your decisions?
We had a discussion on the meta on this very topic in this week's pod. And I just think like you pick the best players, and if they're highly owned, that shouldn't put you off, and you shouldn't go for somebody different just for the sake of being different, right? Pick the best players, whether the ownership is high or not. It's all about the combinations of players. James might be owned, but with player A, B, C, D, E, that combination might not be as much. So I generally don't believe in especially betting against EO.
Yeah, it's only later in the season that I would tend to do it deliberately against it.
Right, the last 5 to 6 weeks, but then when we have a much more robust data set to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's I think I've got Tony in who isn't highly owned, but again, I didn't look at the ownership until afterwards, and he's been a really popular signing this week, so it's fine. So it like I say, it's an afterthought. It should keep it as an afterthought rather than something that steers your decision making. Is what we seem to be saying, right?
I think there's always... Sorry, go on, Seb.
No, oh, thank you very much. I was going to say, Mark, a question for you, sort of on that subject. Obviously, we know you've gone Son over Salah and whatnot. That's been well discussed. I for me, doesn't matter why you arrived at that decision. If you had good rationale, amazing. Doesn't matter if I agree that's the point of the game. But what I want to wonder is, like, when you were looking at that option, did you think Son genuinely could outscore Salah? Or was it a sort of like, if he does, then I will steal a march, but I think Salah probably would outscore him? Which angle were you going for?
Yeah, well, it was. I thought he could keep pace with Salah. Yeah, maybe not beat him, but he's $1 million less, and it allowed me to have a different Liverpool player, so I could still get 3 Liverpool, get a player who could keep pace with Salah, and that was the main thinking, really. I mean, looking at, I think the last, since 2022, Son has kept pace with Salah and more. Obviously, Salah's missed games where Son's been more ever present, so maybe that was a factor. But I think it was a risk worth taking, given that I could get Diaz, Robertson and Trent, which would differentiate my side a little bit because I would have 3 different Liverpool players. But obviously that's not materialised because now I've got rid of Robertson. So it hasn't gone according to plan at all, not only in terms of the points, but in terms of, I didn't think 3 weeks in I'd be down to 2 Liverpool players. But that's the way it's gone. I think it's a bit, so far, I don't think either Son or Salah, to be honest, have been that great. They haven't actually performed at a level to justify their price tags. Yes, Salah's got the return, but he didn't have a very good game at Fulham. So I think we're yet to see the best of either player. So I don't think we can judge yet whether or not how Son compares to Salah. I think at the moment they're not at their peak at all. So I think it's going to take a few more weeks before I can make a call on whether that was a bad choice or not. Right now, just because of the return that Salah got at Fulham, it's a bad choice, but I'm not sold on that. I'm not going to beat myself up about it on the back of that return.
Oh, but hey, I wouldn't judge it on purely outcome either. Like if you're laying down your decision making there and saying, for my team, I believe the net positive was getting Son over Salah because I thought it had the better chance of doing well for me. I can't argue with that. Like I might come to a different decision, but as long as you made the best decision based on your rationale, fair enough.
I think a big factor for me was the captaincy. Last season, I felt that because I had Salah and he was such the dominant heavy hitter for such a long period of time, it restricted my thinking with the captaincy to my detriment, as in I just went to Salah as a default without actually thinking, were there better options? And so another reason why I didn't go Salah this time is to avoid that, because I did think that the likes of Son, De Bruyne, Haaland would give me more choice for the captaincy, and I was worried that if I just went Salah, I wouldn't even consider them week to week. So that was also in my mind as well. It's kind of like giving myself that room, that freedom to make a choice which could be better, which are sometimes, I think, when you've got Salah in your team, you just default to that and not think about it.
I think that's a really interesting angle. Do you think you've maybe treated the symptom, not the cause there? Because I guess you haven't changed whether Salah's a good captain or not. You've just taken that decision away from yourself. Yeah. Arguably, the better thing to do was to be better at picking captains, if you don't mind me saying that.
I mean, and no, but my captaincy picks weren't awful and anything like that. It's just, I guess it's about your philosophy about how you play the game as well. Like the captain's decision is such a big factor, and it's great to celebrate a captaincy haul. But so often last season, when Salah did get that haul, the celebration's muted by the fact that everyone's got him and gone Salah captain. So it was a decision at the start of the season to go, well, I want to have a bit more fun playing the game. I want to have a bit more. I want to challenge myself a little bit more. And I'm glad I did do that, because look at the template. Not being funny, like, yeah, okay, it's great going with the template and watching the points come in and watching your rank go up. If you're trying to challenge yourself and get more fun out of the game, a robust template isn't fun for any of us, really. Let's face it. If we're sitting here in 6 weeks in and we've all got similar teams still, it's going to be hard to say, this is great fun this season. It's going to be, okay, people say points and going up the ranks, that's where the fun is. But for me, the fun is finding that pick that not many managers have gone with and it coming in for you. That moment of joy is one of the great pleasures of playing FPL, I think. And it would be a shame if the template is so strong that we're largely robbed of those moments this season. Hopefully not.
I think what will happen is if the template starts doing badly, then there will be a cycle of people that go, right, let's move away from it. And it starts doing well again, they'll come back to it. So I think it really depends. This diversification really depends on the template starting to have a few bad weeks, and then people will start wavering.
Yeah, and it's only 2 weeks. We shouldn't get carried away. It's just looking at it now, it's very strong. But I think the main thing that's worrying is the value in defence, which has led people to very similar teams. And normally that's not the case, like I said.
I'm going to ask a question on Salah, because obviously we're just about to captain him against Man United, but his goal scoring record in the last 20 games is actually particularly poor. he hasn't really done anything to justify that he's back to his goal-scoring ways. I think it was like, yes, you're waving your hand at me, Seb. I get it. 5 goals in the last 20 matches or whatever it is. Is there anything in this, or is he just, he's having a bit of a bad spell?
You know my position on this, hence the waved hand. Like all the other numbers are fine. Hey, if you choose to judge it differently, to me, absolutely fair enough. Again, similar to the conversation with Mark. But from my point of view, if I'm trying to predict how well he's going to do, I want to look at, say, his underlying numbers. You look at where he's playing on the pitch, absolutely, as well. And I think it was the second half of last season, obviously, when he, didn't return as many points as we'd hoped and fewer than the likes of Son and KDB. His underlying numbers since AFCON were actually better. It was literally just his ability to convert that into points in FPL. So for me personally, I don't believe that whatever reason he wasn't scoring the points is something that would just affect his finishing. Like whether it's confidence, whether it's a new contract, he was still getting into the positions. He just couldn't convert that into goals. You may disagree with me, and I absolutely acknowledge I could be wrong. Like confidence really could be a thing in finishing more than anything else. But I have no way of measuring that, and therefore I can't use it as a predictive tool. So from my point of view, I'm just not stressed about it at all until I get some evidence that works for my processes.
Yeah, I think with Salah, if he's getting the same volume of shots, then it's very hard to kind of go against him because eventually he will convert, right? So my theory this season was that Darwin would come in and that would somewhat reduce Salah's volume of shots. And equally, Son would continue in a role where he's the primary goal scorer and that would increase his volume of shots. And then I do think Son's a better finisher. So when you combine those factors, if that did fall for me, Son would probably match or even better Salah. Now, none of those things might happen, but I gambled on that happening over the course of the season. And it might still, when Darwin gets back in, we might see Salah's volume of shots reduce and Son might continue to be the chief goal threat with Kane dropping deeper. But it hasn't happened yet. But that was my theory. That's what I went with. And I think that's how I want to play FPL. I want to play FPL with what could happen in the future rather than basing my decisions purely on what happened in the past. I mean, a lot of my decisions are based on that. But when you're dealing with like a difference maker like Son versus Salah, I thought it was worth going with that and see what happened. Darwin, it could be, that's the other thing that could change the template as well. We've lost Darwin for 3 weeks, but he could really come in and do what we think he could do, which was shake it up, as in make us reconsider not only our Liverpool assets, but who we captain. Darwin could be a future captain. Looks out of the question at the moment after what we saw in that game, but I think there's more to come from him.
God, you said something there about predicting the future. I mean, do you have a crystal ball? Because I'd like to share that one with you.
No, you can't. But
based on his rank history, yes, he does.
you can only speculate on what could happen. But when there are tactical changes in teams, you've got to expect what we know to be somewhat disrupted. So we know Salah is the highest volume of shots in the Premier League, but if then Liverpool sign a number 9, you anticipate that could be disrupted. Right? That's all I'm saying. And then you go, well, if the ace disrupted, if Salah's volume of shot does go down, will it affect his output? Probably. And that's all it is, right?
I always get confused by the paradox between looking in the past to predict the future, but it's necessary to. But I get what you're saying about there are other factors like fixture runs and all this sort of stuff. But it's necessary. Like in the chat, I think it was Violet Citizen was saying that Salah was just regressing to the mean when we were discussing him. Do you put any credence in the over-underperformance thing, which is something I'm pretty hot on? I'm going to look at taking advantage of that this season. If someone is underperforming, they become overperformance later on. Can you predict the future like that? Or is it just too mechanical?
So I think that's a really interesting question. So in theory, obviously, players will tend towards their XG, or at least their XG modified by their finishing ability, so Son or whatever. So, for example, Son had his best ever season last year, both in terms of goal scoring, but also converting XG into goals. Now, what are the chances he improves on that, stays the same, or gets worse? Well, obviously, it's more likely he gets worse. But getting worse doesn't mean he'll be bad. He could still be brilliant. It's just not quite as good as last year. When we then talk about, say, someone like Salah or your Lingards in the past or whatever, yeah, if a player is, doubling their XG week in, week out, we would expect that to stop. But we wouldn't expect it to stop because they've been doubling it and therefore they now need to underperform to average out. The reason we would expect it to stop is because these are independent events like flipping a coin. And if I flip a coin and get 3 heads in a row, I expect tails or heads next 50-50. I don't expect, say, a 3 times chance of getting heads versus tails. But I also don't expect it to be, 70% likely to be tails to even it out. And I know football isn't a coin flip, but in this talk of probability, that's effectively what it comes down to. So it's important to remember that just because someone has overperformed in the past, it doesn't mean they will underperform in the future, but it does mean they are likely to not continue overperforming by definition.
Yeah, so you need a suitably large time frame for that to happen. You can't say that it's going to happen in a short time frame just because the recent overperformance, it has to even itself out at some point. Yeah, so it's difficult to predict the future like that, but it's going to happen occasionally by coincidence, and I think really determining when that's going to happen is next level analysis.
I do think that obviously predicting the future is not something we want to invest time into trying to do, but at the same time that is part of the fun of the game, and that's why obviously models have become so dominant, which is basing our decisions on the past. That's become a stronger way of playing the game over the years,
an optimal way of playing.
Yeah, exactly right. So in many ways, one of the things that I think is a shame is we've stopped making 1 or 2 decisions based off of that. We're almost frightened to come off of that track because it's proved so reliable and dependable. And you couple that with effective ownership, and you couple that with a template, and suddenly we are all on the same lane, right? And coming out of that lane is described as a risk, right? But I think it's a bit of a shame, and I'm hoping that things shake up and people can be a bit braver as the season goes on, because there's more variety there, and also perhaps because the models aren't always given the solution.
So we're talking really about strategy at the end of the day and ways of predicting the future. And I'm going to try and use this to segue into a question that we had from FPL and Zaki on Twitter yesterday, which is, if you could form the perfect FPL manager, what would you focus on? I've got traits up here like patience, wisdom, data, timing, this sort of thing. But these are just, abstract comments. What do you think really makes the perfect FPL manager, despite the variation in the way that you can play?
I think
Zoff,
patience would be
mate?
right. Patience would be probably right up there for me, but you obviously need a little bit of all of these. But the thing is, a lot of things like wisdom, data, and stuff are done for you by things like analytics nowadays. So I think the edge is sort of slowly being lost over there, where patience will always be a value that you will have some weightage in the game.
Yeah, I guess it's the way to understand information is one element, but also how to implement it is the other side of it. And from my honest perspective, that's something that I lack. I understand what's going on, but I would say that I'm very naive in how to implement it in my FPL team. I make poor choices. And I think, what do you think makes a good FPL manager? Is it that, or is it both, or is it, I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
Well, I think if you want to be a good FPL manager, you could just follow models and get a decent rank. That it depends what you define by good and what your ambition is. I think if you want to win FPL, if you want to come in the top 1,000, you've got to be willing to be aggressive and take opportunities when they arise, or be able to spot those opportunities when you should deviate off that. As I say, I think at the moment you could take what a model spews out and do really well.
Perisic is starting.
There we go. Perisic is starting.
Follow Keith just tweeted.
Yeah. So I think I think Zoff is absolutely right. Like some of the things that combined in the past are now in one solution with the models, right? So you could take them and you can achieve a good rank, and you can be a good FPL manager like that. But I don't know. Is that how you want to play the game week to week?
I think so. In terms of what Mark was talking about earlier as well, with you want to play, say, to get enjoyment out of your weekend because you want to pick players you support, or you want to celebrate a lowly owned player, whatever it is. That's entirely fair enough. If you choose to play for just rank or just for enhancing your weekend, no problem. If you do choose rank, so bear with me, there is an optimal way to play. There absolutely is, but we don't actually know what that is. Like, The testing suggests that the models get close, but the models aren't some magic black box. For example, the review, which is the most popular one, and the one that I like, it does it based on XG, based on expected minutes, based on bookies odds, things like that. All information we have available to us and could crunch ourselves. Just like a calculator though, right? It's just easier to ask the model to do it for us, put the inputs in and get the output than trying to do it by hand. There's nothing special to it, and it absolutely can be wrong because you might disagree with the bookies odds or the way that the model has been formatted. My point being that it isn't using the model is optimal. There is an optimal way to play, and we're trying to find that. Mark's been trying to find that for about 50 years, I think. But Scout, right? Looking at stats, looking at whatever, that was trying to find the best way to play FPL. That's all we're doing now. Then to come to the conversation of winning it, you need luck. You cannot control your luck. You can upside chase, you can take risks. That's not controlling your luck. That's just opting into higher variance and bigger swings, which can go in both ways. And more often will go down rather than up, but we don't hear about those ones. So for me, you choose to play in the best way you think is possible with the information you have, and then you hope for luck. But you can only control one of those things.
Yeah, but to get the luck, you've got to open yourself up to it. Like, you can't captain Salah every week and open yourself up to luck because Salah's going to be the regular pick, right? So you've got to know when it's right to go, right, okay, I'm taking a risk here and I'm putting a lot of my fate in the hands of variance, and it's got to go your way then.
Sure.
So I don't think you can win FBL by playing safe every single week. At some point, it's like if you look at Jamie when he won it last season, he got off Salah early and he backed Son and De Bruyne for the run-in, and it came in for him. And he had an incredible game week 36 where he rolled the dice, I think, with a free hit. Did he captain Son? Something crazy there that he went and nobody else did, and he made up huge ground. But he made the decision that, okay, I'm going to open myself up to variance and take a risk. He knew when to do it and chose the right time. Yes, luck was involved, but he had the courage of conviction to do that, right? And that's what you need as well. You need a little bit of gut feel, a lot of bit of heart to know when to move, basically.
Oh, no, please, Ted, I interrupted you last time.
Sorry. This is the difference, isn't it? What you're saying, Mark, is you need to be able to move away from the optimal scenario in order for that luck to appear.
At times, yeah. Not all the time. So
no, of course.
Choosing those moments, right? And you've got to be lucky with those moments.
The timing is definitely important. So things like pseudoscience, where you look at, for example, a bleating on about underperformance. And Seb, you're saying that this isn't a precise measure. But if you chose to go with someone who was underperforming in the last few weeks, and then you maybe opening yourself up to get lucky that overperformance starts immediately, that is the sort of mechanic or mechanism that you can employ.
Is that luck? Because actually something I quite like doing is picking a player who hasn't got the returns, but Salah, right? But the underlying numbers suggest that there's no reason for that other than luck or something I can't predict like confidence, but I have to take that out of my thinking because I can't use it. So I would say rather than hoping to get lucky, all I'm doing is picking a player that is good and has always been good, but other people might not pick because they're looking at the outcome. And therefore I'm giving myself an advantage on the field, I guess, in terms of ownership rather than like luck or anything. That links those two conversations. If I may, I have an analogy for what Mark was saying as well, which might be terrible, but bear with me. So if like a model or our thinking or whatever, we're trying to predict the future, it's not a sat nav, it's not taking us to the exact correct location, it's a weather forecast. It is looking at the chance that X, Y, and Z happen and assigning values to those. You can, when you're looking at the weather forecast, go, okay, there is a 70% chance of rain, but that means there's a 30% chance of sun. And so I'm putting shorts on today because if I'm right on that 30%, I'm going to have a much better day than everyone else using raincoats. But before we know whether it rains or not, what was the right decision? I would argue the right decision was the raincoat. But in 30% of the outcomes, you look like an idiot and you should have worn shorts. Now, I'm not saying, I realize I just said idiot. No, Jamie Piggott for winning it is not an idiot by any means. He won it. And that's more than I will ever do. But I think ahead of time, when we're picking KDB over Salah or whatever it is, we are putting on the shorts, not the raincoat. That absolutely might come off, but you are choosing to go with the less likely outcome for the hope of winning FPL. Brilliant. But if I'm ranked 100k or something, I probably shouldn't make that move. If I'm ranked second, hell yeah, I'll go for that chance.
Oh, it's a good analogy. Although Mark would be disappointed by the 30% chance of Son. That's
it depends. It depends who's more accurate, the weather forecast or the models, right? I guess how accurate that analogy is. But it's a good one. I mean, I guess that I'm just saying it at some point in your season, if you want to go from a good manager to being a great one, as in getting in the top 1K, you have to open yourself up to luck. You've got to be brave enough to do it, because otherwise you're following a cloud path, aren't you? You're following the same route that other managers are, and there'll be some point where you plateau and you go, okay, I'm just going up and down a small amount of rank. So then it depends on your ambition. If you're happy with that, you bank it and go, right, I've top 10K finish, brilliant. And do that season upon season, and that's great. You're a great FPL manager. But I think there'll be a moment perhaps when people want more, and that's when you push, and that's when it's like, well, you're in the lap of the gods then. But if you do it with an elite player like Jamie did, then there's every chance he can still come in. So yeah, it's really interesting the way the game has gone, and this season in particular at the moment. But it's so early. We'll have to see how things pan out. Let's see if Perisic shakes it up.
God, he will. I know he will. He's going to...
You're dreading it, aren't you?
I'm just getting so much FOMO at the moment. It's unbelievable. Let the emotion get the better of me, guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, talking earlier, this is the thing, isn't it? I can say like, oh, weather forecast and sound real clever. But as soon as Perisic starts, I'm like, oh, I had the money for that and I had the transfer. Oh, no. And isn't that, you've got these things on the screen here, Ted. I would say the biggest one is, I guess being a robot, being a model, sort of trying to avoid all those biases that, we can't avoid them, right? We're humans. That's how our brains work. But acknowledging them, acknowledging FOMO, acknowledging, the recency bias. I think that is the best way to improve your FPL play.
Yeah, I think so. With all of my naivety, I think in the last 5 years, I've got the best finish amongst all of you guys. Just to put it out there as a little bit of a...
What's that? So what, the highest rank out of all of us?
I specifically said last 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your finish then?
What went right in that season then?
I think I bought in Salomon Rondon when he was...
Wow, blimey.
Massively...
Mark said what went right, Ted?
What did Rondon do for you?
He just had a massive... It was Jimenez, Rondon and Doherty, I think it was, when they were playing for Wolves. But it was just one of those where it just seemed to go right. 63rd I finished up. Yeah. And it was the underperformance thing. And since then I've sort of neglected it properly. So I'm trying to get back to it. It might be a pseudoscience, but I'm going to give it a go this year to see if it works. Yeah. Who knows? Pity about the rest of the seasons, by the way.
Lineups are out and yep. It's confirmed. It's the same team that Paulo Keefe predicted.
So read it out for us, Soph.
He was correct again.
It is Lloris, Royal, Sanchez, Dyer, Davies, Perisic, Bentancur, Højbjerg, Kulusevski, Son and Kane.
Okay. So basically...
I think this Perisic is the only change, and obviously because of Romero being out.
Have we got the Wolves team news? Anyone who's kept on with Neto? Does he start?
Yes, I think Neto does start. It's Sa, Johnny, Collins, Kilman, Nouri, Neves, Nunes, Moutinho, Guedes, Podence, Neto. Are there any non-Portuguese players in that team? Probably one or two, I guess.
So what's that? Is Guedes in for the departed Gibbs White?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Neves, Nunes, and Moutinho is interesting. That should be fun. It's quite an attacking midfield.
It's good.
Interesting. More space for Son. I think you've got to be happy with that, Mark.
Well, speculate that'll happen. We'll see. I mean, I hope I get something. I hope I get a return. He was, as I say, so strong in home matches last season. I expect to get something at least. I'm going to need it, I think, because Salah will get something at United, surely. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to the game.
Good stuff. Lots of anticipation, expectation for Game Week 3. I think we're going to leave it there, guys. We stayed until team news. It's been an excellent discussion. Thank you all for joining me.
Pleasure. Thank you, Ted.
Okay, thanks all joining us in the chat, and best of luck Game Week 3. We'll see you soon.